The Galactic Military Academy on Station Terminus had trained warriors from 47 different species for over 300 years. It was known throughout the galaxy as the place where the weak became strong and the strong became deadly. The instructors here did not believe in gentle teaching. They believed in pain. They believed in fear. They believed that suffering built character and weakness deserved punishment. This was the way it had always been done. This was the way it would always be done. At least, that is what everyone believed until the human arrived. Commander Krath stood at the observation window, watching the new batch of recruits struggle through their first day of basic combat training. He was a Vorlaxian, 7 feet tall with gray-scaled skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. His species had produced some of the finest warriors in galactic history. They were born knowing how to fight. They were raised knowing how to kill. Krath himself had survived the training pits of Vorlax Prime, where 1 in 3 recruits died before graduation. He wore the scars on his body like medals. Each one told a story of pain survived, of weakness burned away, of strength earned through blood. The recruits below were a mixed group. There were young Keltari, blue-skinned and slender, their natural speed making them excellent scouts. There were drawn younglings, massive creatures covered in thick brown fur, built like walking mountains. And then there were the Fenari cubs. This was the group that held Krath's attention. The Fenari were a relatively new species to the galactic community. They resembled what humans might call foxes, but they walked upright and stood about 4 feet tall when fully grown. These cubs were even smaller, barely reaching 3 feet. They had soft orange and white fur, large ears that moved constantly, and big golden eyes that seemed to take in everything around them. The Fenari had joined the Galactic Alliance only 20 years ago. Their homeworld had been attacked by raiders, and the Alliance had saved them from extinction. In gratitude, they had pledged military service. But the truth was, the Fenari were not warriors. They were farmers. They were artists. They were storytellers and singers. Their culture valued kindness above strength, community above individual glory. Sending their young ones to the academy was an act of desperate loyalty, a way to prove their worth to the Alliance that had saved them. Krath watched the Fenari cubs fumble with their training weapons and felt nothing but disgust. The senior instructor on the training floor was Drill Master Voss, a Krethian female whose species looked like bipedal crocodiles. She was screaming at the recruits, her voice echoing off the metal walls. The Kelthari were keeping up with her demands. The drawn younglings were slow but steady. But the Fenari cubs were failing. They could not hold the heavy training staves properly. Their small arms shook with the effort. One cub, smaller than the others, dropped her weapon for the 3rd time. Voss noticed immediately. She always noticed failure. That was her job. Krath leaned forward as Voss stalked toward the small cub. He knew what was coming next. It was standard procedure at the academy. Failure was punished. Pain taught lessons that words could not. The neural whips that all instructors carried delivered agony directly to the nervous system without causing permanent damage. A recruit could be whipped 100 times and still fight the next day. The pain was temporary. The lesson was permanent. This was the way things were done. Voss pulled her neural whip from her belt. The small Fenari cub looked up at her with those huge golden eyes, and for a moment, Krath thought he saw acceptance there. The cub was not going to cry or beg or run. She was simply going to take the punishment. This was wrong somehow. Krath could not explain why, but something about this felt wrong. He pushed the feeling aside. Feelings had no place in military training. Then the human walked onto the training floor. His name was Sergeant Major James Chen, and he had arrived at the academy only 1 week ago as part of the first human military exchange program. Humans had joined the Galactic Alliance just 5 years prior, and they were still considered newcomers. Nobody knew quite what to make of them. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most intelligent. They had no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or venom. And yet, something about humans made other species nervous. Perhaps it was the way they moved, with a quiet confidence that suggested they knew secrets others did not. Perhaps it was their eyes, which always seemed to be watching, always seemed to be thinking. Chen was not a large man by human standards. He stood about 5 feet 10 inches tall with a lean, muscular build. His skin was a warm brown color. His hair was black and cut short, and his eyes were dark and calm. He wore the simple gray uniform of a visiting officer, with none of the medals or decorations that Vorlaxian warriors loved to display. He walked onto the training floor without permission, without announcement, as if he had every right to be there. Voss stopped mid-swing, her whip crackling with energy. "What are you doing on my training floor, human?" she demanded. Her voice was like gravel being crushed. Chen did not answer immediately. He walked past her, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. He walked until he stood between Voss and the small Fenari cub who still knelt on the ground. Then he turned to face Voss. His expression was calm. His posture was relaxed. He did not look like a man facing down an angry Crethean warrior. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. "I'm observing," he said. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried across the entire training floor. "Is that permitted?" Voss bared her teeth, which were many and sharp. "You are interfering with discipline. Step aside." Chen did not move. He looked at the whip in her hand, then at the cub behind him, then back at Voss. Something changed in his eyes. The calm was still there, but underneath it, something else had awakened. Something old and cold and patient. "No," he said, just one word, one simple word. But it stopped everything. The other recruits stopped their exercises. The assistant instructors stopped their patrol. Even the automated training drones seemed to pause. Krath, watching from above, felt his scales tighten against his skin. He had commanded armies. He had faced death more times than he could count. But something about the way this human said that single word made him want to look away. Voss did not back down. Her species never backed down. "You have no authority here, human. This cub failed her exercise. Failure is punished. This is our way." Chen tilted his head slightly, like a predator considering its prey. "Your way," he repeated. "Tell me, drill master, what is the purpose of punishment?" Voss snorted. "To teach. Pain teaches where words fail." "Does it?" Chen's voice remained soft. "Let me tell you what I see. I see a child who is too small to hold a weapon designed for species twice her size. I see a child who has not complained, has not cried, has not given up. I see a child who keeps trying, even though every part of her body must be screaming to stop. And your response to this courage is to hurt her?" "Courage?" Voss laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "She is weak. She failed." "She is 3 feet tall and 30 pounds, Chen said. "Your training staves weigh 15 pounds each. That would be like asking one of your Crethian recruits to train with a weapon that weighs half their body weight. Do you do that, drill master? Do you set your Crethian recruits up to fail and then punish them for the failure you designed?" Voss was silent. Her whip still crackled in her hand, but she did not raise it. Chen turned to look at the other Fenari cubs. They were huddled together, their ears flat against their heads, their tails tucked between their legs. They were terrified, not of the training, not of the exercises. They were terrified of the instructors. They were terrified of the whips. They were terrified of this place that was supposed to turn them into warriors. "On my world," Chen said, and now his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, "we have a saying. You do not break something to make it stronger. You do not crush hope to build courage. You do not teach through terror. Fear is a tool, yes, but it is a poor teacher. Fear teaches creatures to hide, to run, to surrender before the fight begins. If you want soldiers, make them afraid. If you want warriors, make them believe. Krath found himself leaning forward, his 4 hands gripping the observation window ledge. He had never heard anyone speak like this. In 300 years, no one had ever questioned the Academy's methods. No one had ever stood on the training floor and told an instructor they were wrong. It was unthinkable. It was impossible. And yet, here was this human, this small, soft, clawless human, doing exactly that. Chen knelt down in front of the small Fenari cub. His movements were slow and gentle, like someone approaching a frightened animal. He reached out and picked up the training staff that she had dropped. He looked at it for a moment, then set it aside. "What is your name?" he asked the cub. She looked at him with those huge golden eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mira." "Mira," Chen repeated. "That is a beautiful name. Mira, do you know why you are here? Do you know why your people sent you to this place?" Mira's ears twitched. "To become a warrior, to serve the Alliance, to make my people proud." Chen nodded. "Your people sent you here because they love you, because they believe in you, because they want you to have a future where you are not afraid anymore, not of raiders, not of anyone. They sent you here because they see something in you that is worth protecting, worth nurturing, worth believing in." He paused. "Do you understand?" Mira's eyes had started to shine with tears. She nodded. Chen stood and turned back to Voss. "Drill Master, I am going to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What kind of soldier do you want to create? Do you want a soldier who fights because they fear punishment? Or do you want a warrior who fights because they believe in something? Because I can tell you from experience, when the darkness comes, when the battle seems lost, when every instinct screams to run and hide, fear breaks, fear shatters like glass, but belief holds, faith holds, hope holds. These are the foundations of true warriors." Voss's whip slowly lowered. Her tail, which had been rigid with anger, began to relax. She looked at Chen with new eyes, eyes that were perhaps seeing him for the first time. "You speak of things I do not understand, human." "Then let me show you," Chen said. He turned to face all the recruits. "For the next 3 hours, I will be conducting training for any who wish to learn. You will not be punished, you will not be hurt, but you will be pushed. You will be challenged, and you will discover what you are truly capable of when you are not afraid of your own teachers." The Fenari cubs looked at each other. Their ears slowly began to rise. Their tails uncurled. One by one, they stepped forward. Mira was the first. She walked up to Chen and stood beside him, her small body trembling slightly, but her chin held high. The other Fenari cubs followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, several Kelthari recruits joined them. Then 3 drawn younglings. Even a few Vorlaxian cadets moved to stand with the human. Krath watched all of this from the observation window. His mouth had fallen open. In 300 years, nothing like this had ever happened. Recruits did not choose their instructors. Recruits did not defy their training masters. This was not how things were done. This was wrong. And yet, as he watched Chen begin to work with the recruits, as he saw the fear fade from their faces and something else take its place, he wondered if perhaps everything he had ever believed about training warriors was wrong too. Over the next 3 hours, Chen taught in ways no instructor at the academy had ever taught before. He did not scream. He did not threaten. He did not punish failure. Instead, he explained. He demonstrated. He adjusted. When Mira could not hold the standard training staff, he found a lighter one that fit her hands. When she still struggled, he taught her a different grip, one that used her speed and flexibility instead of raw strength. When she finally managed to complete a basic combat sequence, he smiled at her, and Mira's face lit up like a small sun. The change in the recruits was remarkable. Without fear clouding their minds, they learned faster. Without pain waiting for every mistake, they were willing to try new things, to push their limits, to fail and try again. By the end of the 3 hours, Mira had completed exercises that she could not even attempt before. She was not the fastest or the strongest, but she was learning. She was growing, and most importantly, she was not afraid. Voss watched the entire session from the edge of the training floor. Her whip remained on her belt. Her expression shifted throughout the hours, moving from anger to confusion to something that might have been understanding. When Chen finally called an end to the training session, she approached him. "Human," she said. "Chen, you have shown me something today. I do not fully understand it, but I will think on your words." Chen nodded. "That is all I ask, Drill Master." Voss looked at the Fennery cubs, who were laughing and chattering with each other, their earlier terror completely forgotten. "They are still weak," she said. "They will still struggle." "Yes," Chen agreed. "But they will struggle forward instead of struggling against themselves. They will grow instead of shrink. And one day, when the battle comes, they will stand instead of run. Not because they fear what happens if they run, but because they believe in what they are protecting." Voss was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone watching. She bowed. It was a shallow bow, barely more than a nod, but for a Crethian warrior, it was a gesture of profound respect. "Perhaps," she said, "humans have something to teach us after all." As Chen left the training floor, Mira ran up to him. She tugged at his sleeve, and when he looked down, she threw her small arms around his leg in a tight hug. Her voice was muffled against his uniform. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for believing in us." Chen reached down and gently patted her head. "Thank yourself, Mira. I just reminded you of what was already there." Up in the observation deck, Commander Krath finally released the breath he did not know he had been holding. He looked at his own hands, at the scars that covered them, at the memories of pain that had shaped him into the warrior he was. For the first time in his long life, he wondered what he might have become if someone had believed in him instead of breaking him. The academy would never be the same after that day. The changes started small, new training methods introduced quietly, punishment protocols reviewed and revised. But they grew. Word spread throughout the galactic military community about the human who had stopped the whips with a single word. About a different way to create warriors, about belief instead of fear. And in the years that followed, when the Fenari soldiers won their first major victory against a pirate fleet twice their size, when Mira herself led a desperate defense that saved 3 civilian transports from destruction, everyone remembered where it had started. Everyone remembered the human who had stood between fear and hope and chosen hope. That is the thing about humans that other species are only beginning to understand. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. But they have something else. They have the power to make others believe, to show them what they could become, to stand in the darkness and light a fire that others can follow. This is why, when humans joined the Galactic Alliance, everything began to change. Not through conquest, not through war, but through something far more powerful, through the simple revolutionary act of believing in others.